Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to paint this mango martini with some watercolors, and these are the tonic watercolors. I have the mixing set of 6, and that's what I'm going to be using here for this lesson. I did throw a couple other colors into this set, but I'm just going to stick to the mixing color set of 6 because I was doing this painting, for one, because I wanted to, but also because I wanted to do see how they mixed, and it's part of the review that I'll have out on these watercolors in a couple of weeks. So TDLR, I really like them, and I think they're a good value, and I actually have a coupon code for $5 off your order at St. Louis Art Supplies, where they make these tonic watercolors. So I'll put that in the video description in case you have some shopping to do or you want to go check it out. They also have a dot card of these watercolors they've just released of the 6 colors for $6. So definitely you could try it before you invested in a big set. The big set with the 6 colors and porcelain pans plus an empty pan is like $95 before the discount. So just something to think about. I think it would make a really nice Christmas gift if you're thinking about a watercolorist in your life. But anyway, we'll have the full review of that probably in about 2 weeks on my channel. And what I'm doing here is just sketching with a gray Color-Ace pencil. I like using the Color-Ace pencils because sometimes, now gray, it does look a lot like graphite, but I find a lot of times when I sketch with them and then I watercolor or I use marker over them, they just kind of just disappear. They don't dissolve, but they just kind of blend in with everything. So I think it's just a more natural look. And also, if I'm getting stuck, sometimes using a different color, like drawing in blue or red or green, it just unsticks my brain a bit and helps me draw a little bit easier. I thought the funky glass in this reference photo that I found on Unsplash was really cute, and I also loved all the colors of the fruits and stuff. So I thought it was a really good subject for these paints. When I test out watercolors, I like to choose something that's got a lot of variety of color, just so I can see how try out all the colors, make sure they're all going to mix and look good together. I had the foot of that glass a little bit wonky, so I erased it and needed to go back in and take another run at it. It is an asymmetrical glass, so that does make it a little bit trickier, but also, on the other hand, since it is asymmetrical, you have a little bit of wiggle room there in the stem anyway. But it definitely has to look like something that's going to balance, so I took my time sketching that out. I'll have the photo linked down below if you want to draw along with me, maybe bring it up on your screen or print it out or something. It's a really fun sketch to do, and I think this would be really fun in a variety of different media. It's so bright and colorful. It would be great in markers or ink or anything you like, really, I think. So now that I've got my sketch on the paper, I'm going to start painting. I'm going to start with this really kind of cool yellow and put some color into that lime slice. Now I have sped this up a little bit. It took me about 45 minutes to draw and paint in real time. So I've sped it up almost double. And I'm going to take a little bit of the cyan, which is a phthalo blue here, into both of my yellows, actually, get myself a little bit more of a natural looking green, and put that rind in there. I don't know if this is going to be boring or not. I was just kind of vibing out and painting and not narrating at the same time, figuring I'd go in afterwards. And it's kind of a fun way to do it, honestly. I just wanted to have fun with the paints and really focus on the paint rather than explaining what I'm doing, because this was a piece I did to just really try these out for a review, so I wanted to really pay attention to how the paints were working. The brush I'm using here is a number 8 Mimic Round, which is the Faux Squirrel brand of brushes that Jerry's Artorama sells under the Creative Mark line. You can also get them at Amazon in different, I think they also have singles and sets on Amazon, but they definitely have singles and sets over at Jerry's, and I just recommend you check both places if you're considering buying them, because sometimes it's cheaper on Amazon, sometimes it's cheaper at Jerry's. You just got to kind of keep an eye out for that sort of thing. Obviously, I'm sure you know that. I wanted to see how the blending was going to go with like wet on dry. And so I've got this mango here, and there's some really soft blends into color, but I didn't want to wet the whole thing and then just drop the color in, because then it could get muddy and it could overblend a little bit. I wanted to control the little portions where the paint was. So I'm going on the dry paper and just kind of touching the edges to let the colors blend together. I did find this paint had a pretty good flow. It doesn't use Oxgall, I don't believe. I believe it's like a synthetic flow aid that's in there, but I will link to that. You can read all about them on the St. Louis Art Supply website. They make them in-house. But yeah, I didn't have any qualms at all about these. I can't wait till they release more colors. They're going to eventually come out with 35 colors, but currently there are 10 colors. They're the 6 in the starter set, which I have. And they're all single pigment. Then they have a carbon black. They have a phthalo green. They call it evergreen, but it's a phthalo green, PG7 green. They have a Prussian blue, and they now have released a titanium white. But if you're not sure, but you're curious, dot card is a great way to go, although there's only the 6 colors in the mixing set on the dot card. But that's a brand new edition, so I wanted to make sure that I let people know about that we're thinking about it. But I love the ceramic pans. I love the large size. I don't have to worry about damaging my brush. I feel like I'm just regurgitating my review. I guess you probably don't need to watch a review unless you absolutely love unboxing, swatching, color mixing, and all of that jazz that I do during a review. I don't know. I don't know what you like. That's up to you. You can decide. And maybe you need something to fall asleep to. And in that case, my reviews are for you. They're long and there's lots of information. And I'm sure I have helped as many people as Ambien at this point in my YouTube career. I'll get a good night's sleep. I like the wet onto wet blending, so I kind of went in first with the brighter red. Actually, I like to mix both of those reds together to get a neutral red, because the Quin Magenta is very purpley and the Pyrrole Scarlet is very tomatoey red. So mixing them together gives me a nice neutral kind of fire engine red, and then I can dilute that down to get more of a neutral pink color. I think it's a really smart way this palette is designed, having kind of a bigger gap between the primaries so that you do have a greater range in color mixing capability. And yet you could still get most of the colors that you want. Obviously, we all have our favorite colors, and I'm not saying that you should limit yourself to 6 colors, but I did want to see what these 6 colors would do in this painting. Now, when I'm painting glass, one of the biggest tips I would say is that you need some hard edges, and go in and get those darks in first. And the downside to doing this with watercolors is that if you do brush over them, you may lift the color up if the colors that are on the bottom are liftable, kind of more sedimentary. But when you're working with professional paints, generally they're not going to lift unless you're trying to scrub them out. So I like to get those really dark, hard shadows, hard refractions in right off the bat. You could see at times the glass will look a little bit tippy, a little bit wonky, but I tend to always be drawing when I am painting. And if I need to nudge something here or there, I do that in the painting process. That's why if I'm going to do fine lining, I do it at the end, because I feel like my drawing is always in flux as I'm painting. Unless I'm teaching a class and I've prepared a pattern ahead of time for my students, I like the fact that I can kind of adjust and nudge a bit as I go. Although probably my biggest self-complaint is that, and I spend a little more time on the drawing. You know, I do usually kind of curse myself as I'm going through the process there. You might be wondering what those other colors on my palette are that I'm not using. I have a couple like dabs of like leftover Da Vinci gouache, which are so much like watercolor that I just left them on this palette. And then when I was filling up the burnt sienna, I had to give it a good stir. And I just kind of cleaned my toothpick off of my palette so it didn't go to waste. And also there was a little bit of paint left in the neck of the tube of burnt sienna, and I'm such a miser when it comes to paint, so I had to like dig out all that paint and I just threw it on that palette to dry and use up later, because I use burnt umber. I use burnt umber or burnt sienna as a brown in almost every painting, so I knew I would have use for it. Although I didn't in this one because I wanted to stick to those 6 colors. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with them. Now I'm planing this lime here, and I'm in there lifting out some of the color because the green flowed into the fruit, like the fruit flesh color, and it was the green from the rind, so I wanted to lift that up and then let it dry. And I did dry this paper at this point, and now I'm going in and adding some of the mango juice or the drink there in the glass. And it is kind of lifting up a little bit of my color, not too bad, but it can soften the edges. I just kind of put in some of the darker mango color for like shadows and refractions in the ice cube, because painting ice is very much like painting glass. Painting liquids is like painting glass, especially if it's a translucent like cocktail or something. I love to paint cocktails because I think there's such an artistry in the way they're put together, and they're pretty to see. They're fun to paint, especially if you're trying to get a lot of colors in. And I did a painting last year. There's a video. Oh, is there a video? Yeah, there's a time lapse of a version of it, because I did one out at a like workshop. It was just kind of like a open studio type thing, and I just collected a bunch of reference photos of cocktails and I made a still life with them, and I liked it so much I'm like, oh, I want to do a tutorial of this. So I did a Critique Club tutorial with a pattern, and then I also did a time lapse for YouTube. But I used the watercolor markers, and it was really fun because I got to use a bunch of those really vibrant saturated colors. And yeah, I love those colors. I love vibrant, bright colors that I don't know, they just kind of, I guess, spark joy. They're just happy to look at. Right here, I'm getting ready to do a shadow. So I am wetting the bottom of my paper with clear water, and then I am just going to add in this mix. What I did was I took the ultramarine blue and I took the orangey red. So those colors are pretty far apart on the color wheel. So the further apart two colors are on the color wheel, the more likely they are to make a neutral, either a gray or a brown. Now this one, since it was the red it's still a red, even though it's an orangey red, and the blue is still a blue, they're going to have a little bit of a purple tint to it, almost like a aubergine color. But I like that color for a shadow because it's kind of a lively shadow, and I liked how the colors flow. I didn't have a streakiness, which I like that. I love color. Obviously, if you wanted to make more of a neutral color, you could add a little bit of yellow in there, that warm yellow, and that would kick out the purple undertones and give you more of a neutral. But I like that little bit of a purple in my shadow. I needed some more darks in the foot of this glass. It's going to help weight it, give a little bit of visual weight. Plus it was a little bit darker because there's less light getting to that section of the painting with the shadow from the drink itself and the fruit that's surrounding the bottom of the glass. Plus we've got a sprig of mint there that I haven't painted yet that will add in a little bit more visual weight and cover part of the foot there. It looks real tippy because you're only seeing half of it because that leaf is covering up part of it. So it'll all come together. Gotta trust me. Just gotta trust me here. One thing I thought was really interesting was when I was looking at the lime, and you can access a reference photo in the video description, was that how much orange how much orange tone there was in the center of that lime. And sometimes you just have to really trust your reference and not paint what you think is there, because I never would have thought there'd be that much orange in a lime. Generally, if I cut a lime in half and I'm using it for something, I notice it's very, very light, I almost think of like it being kind of like a lime green, or even a whitish lime green, kind of a really pale spearmint color. But that's not necessarily the case. So you really got to make sure that you're paying attention to color, you're paying attention to value. Value is a big one, because if you don't have your darks as dark as they need to be, then it's not going to look right. You could have the colors all wackadoodle off. So that's why I say don't worry about the colors so much. Just choose a selection of colors that can get you a good mixing capability, because a color can be a little bit off, not a big deal. The values are off, that's a big deal. That's when things start to look really childish or amateurish. So by having this variety of greens here in the mint, it gives it volume and depth, and all of a sudden it looks like mint. Even though I have absolutely zero detail here, it still looks like a garnish, right? It looks like some mint. So getting a good impression by putting in the values correctly, getting a color that's in the ballpark, that's really that's 90% of the work right there. The rest of it is just fluff, it's just finishing, it's just zhuzhing it up a bit. Don't sweat those little details until you make sure you have the foundation right in your painting. Now I'm going in and adding some of those darker shadows and kind of concentrations of color, because that's another thing that glass and ice will do, is they will pull colors together. They will pull value together. They will refract color and refract things that are around them in the environment. So even though the liquid in the cup may not be very dark, it's going to be pulling reflections from the mango and the pear and the lime and the mint and the strawberry, and it's going to be distorting those colors and magnifying them and amplifying them. And then you'll have white highlights where there's just nothing there. So you have to not only paint the glass or paint the ice or paint the liquid, but you're also painting, and in fact, I think you're more painting the interactions and the reflections that those objects are giving you. And I think that's why I love to paint glass. I have a whole class on painting glass if you want to learn more, if you're new to it and you want to kind of start at the beginning and learn how to paint glass. And I just love that subject. There's just something so magical about it to me. And it's always interesting and it's always challenging. And when you paint a lot and if you've been painting for a long time, sometimes you can fall into the trap of painting the same thing over and over again, painting what's comfortable, painting what works, and you miss that challenge. And I love glass because it is painting a challenge for me. I'm using a soft scrubber brush to lift out a soft highlight on the mango and pear, and this is by Royal and Langnickel, and it is the soft scrubber. You don't want the hard scrubbers because they can tear your paper up, but these are like short-haired Taklon filberts, and they are such a useful brush. I highly recommend every watercolor artist have at least one in their arsenal. As I work through my painting, my brushes get smaller, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I generally will work bold and broad to small and detailed in my work because I feel it's good to get those broad, accurate shapes and chunks of colors first, and then put the details in at the end. Also, by using a smaller brush at the end, it's only going to hold so much paint. So even if you do make a mistake at the end after you've put all that work in, you're only going to do so much damage because it's only going to give you just a crisp little line of color, a little bit of paint. You can see how often I have to reload that brush. This is just a small, I guess you'd consider it a liner because of the length of the bristles. It's a, I think it's a Robert Simmons, just Taklon brush. I think it's actually made for acrylics, but it works good for this situation. And I'm just mixing up some darks here and adding little details in the glass. Basically, I want to get that crisp, hard edge of the glass, and that's going to be a nice contrast to the organic shapes I have in this piece. I just love how vibrant everything is and how bright and cheerful the colors are. And sometimes that's what you need, right? I really think when you're trying to decide what to paint, don't necessarily think, what can I paint? What am I capable of painting? Think about what would I want to paint if I could paint anything, because that's going to keep your interest up and that's going to keep you painting. Because even if it's a struggle, as long as it's really close within your reach, even if it's a little bit out of reach from your skill set, as long as it's close, you're going to have the satisfaction of going for a goal. It's going to be just difficult enough to keep you interested. And I think where I see painters kind of get bored or get burned out with their art practice, it's when they're not pushing themselves and they're not striving to get better, because you can kind of plateau. And I think when you plateau, that's when you tend to experience burnout as an artist. I'm darkening that center pit in the lime with a little bit of that purpley shadow color I made. Now, another reason why I'm not adding yellow to that shadow too much is because I don't want to have a muddy look. I want this picture to be very vibrant. And by using a more just slightly leaning purple shadow rather than pulling it over to gray or pulling it into the brown neutral department, it's giving me a really crisp look. These colors are very transparent also, so that helps in keeping it from getting too muddy. But if I added in yellows into that purple, it definitely would have, it would maybe gray a little bit, but it would have a real big chance of turning brown. And I didn't really want brown here, except for maybe the stem on the pear. I do mix up a little brown for the stem on the pear, but other than that, I wanted my colors to be more crisp and more vibrant, either poppy color or slightly desaturated color or deep value color, but I wanted a lot of color there, and I like that color against the white background paper. I will say, though, a subject like this, that's like a liquid subject, if you do happen to make a smudge on the background, it would be a really good type of painting for some spatter. So oftentimes when I'm painting cocktails, I will put splashes and spatters of colorful watercolor in because I think it adds to the effervescence and feeling of a liquid subject. So Hey, a smudge is just an opportunity for spatter or embellishment. And keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. I didn't use any white in this painting till the end. A lot of times you can use a little white for sparkle. I did use a little white pen on the end, but I have to say, just even looking at this progress, I don't even think it's necessary. So it's totally up to you. And I think you should remember that anytime you're painting something and maybe you're following a tutorial or you're inspired by another artist's work, but maybe there's something about it you don't like. When you're painting your art, it's your art, and it is your choice to add or omit whatever you want to it. And rather than judging another artist for choosing to add or omit something to it, keep your eyes on your own paper and do what you want to do, and don't worry about it. I think sometimes we can feel that there's these expectations to our art and we need to do certain things for it to be accepted or for it to be popular online, because it's so nice to get that external validation for our work. But I mean, think of how you painted before the internet, before you started sharing your work online, if you do. It was different. Maybe you shared it with your family members. It was nice to get the validation, but you didn't require it to enjoy your hobby. And I think it's really important to remember that in this day and age where you might feel pressured to share everything that you make, that you don't have to, A, and B, it doesn't have to please anybody except for you, the artist who's creating it, unless you're doing a commercial work for somebody. Just learn, enjoy, grow. That's where the enjoyment comes from. That's where the happiness comes from. It's being in that flow state where you just are immersed in the subject and you're enjoying it. And that's what I want for you. That's what I want for anybody watching my videos. I want them to feel the joy. I made a little brown by mixing some of that red mix and some green mix on my palette. And yeah, it matches because I use colors I've already used. An interesting topic I was thinking about recently is, what is brown? Now, obviously brown can be made from a single iron pigment, but brown is also a very desaturated orange. Browns, generally, if you add a lot of water to brown, you're going to get down to like a peachy or an orangey color. So if you mix an orange, or say you take red and yellow and you mix an orange, then you add its opposite, which is blue, you're going to get a brown. So just kind of think of that. What is a color? When you're looking at a color and you're trying to figure out how to mix it, just really dig in. What is that color? What is it closest to? You may have a very complex neutralized color, maybe like an olive green. Okay, what is that color? That color is a green, for instance. Okay, so I've mixed this green. It's really bright. So what do I do to make it less bright? Okay, what's across it from the color wheel? You would get a red. If you added a red to that, a little bit of red to that vibrant green, it's going to get a little bit more neutralized. Now, you don't want it to go gray. So you might actually want to mix, instead of exactly across the color wheel, which will actually give you more of a gray, you'd want to go a little bit warmer. So you'd want to mix a little bit of orange into that bright green to get more of an olivey green. So the more you understand color, and the best way to understand color is by mixing color, the more you understand that, the more you're going to be better at color mixing and be more intuitive with your color mixing and get better results that are more sophisticated looking. Now here, as we're wrapping up this painting, I'm doing some white highlights. I'm just using a white gel pen just to bring some sparkle back. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think it does add a little bit of a crispness to it. Again, it's up to you. Do you want to do this or not? It's pretty without it. It's pretty with it. It's just totally up to you. I think when you add the white highlights, it does make it a little bit more illustrative looking, which I happen to like that look. But it's, again, totally up to you. Adding like little sparkles here and there, especially on glass, I find is very effective. Another thing I did that I didn't do on camera because I really wanted to directly look down over my piece when I did it, and you'll see it in the final photo, is I did add a little bit of black fine lining to some edges. So I added some on my darkest edges just to give it a little extra crispness. I added it to the glass to give it a little extra hardness and those deep reflections. But it was just like a 0.2 fine liner. And I just grab some edges here and there. Sometimes I feel like I just need a little sharpening. Basically what it does is like, it's like using the sharpen tool on a painting. And I did fiddle around with a little bit of color pencil here for some of the texture on the mango and the pear. I don't know if it really added much. It's up to you. It just basically brought out that cold press texture in my paper and added a little extra layer of dimension. Again, totally up to you whether you want to do that or not. I felt like the mint leaves also needed a little bit of something, maybe a little shading and detail, and I did that with a colored pencil. And also you can kind of fine line with your colored pencils too, if you want to bring back a little bit of edge or crispness. Again, I'm a mixed media artist, so I love to do this, but if you want to stay pure watercolor or not, that's totally fine too. And here you'll see the photo with my fine lining on it. It's not super dramatic. It's very subtle, very mindful, very demure. I hope you enjoyed this project, and please give me a thumbs up if you enjoy tutorials like this. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you're doing Inktober or any other art challenge this month, I wish you the best of luck. I'm rooting for you. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye.